From that time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord. This shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Then Jesus told his disciples, If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
Today I want to focus on the question in my mind today from the gospel that we heard for the first time in English and in Spanish. We're officially bilingual today. Is, you know, this part where Jesus tells his disciples, and he says, if you want to become my followers, you got to deny yourselves. Take up your cross and follow me. Because if you want to save your own life, you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, then you will find true life. And you know, this lose your life for my sake, what does that mean? And it always makes me scratch my head and go, what is Christ really talking about when he's talking to these disciples? And I think in a nutshell, the whole central theme of the gospel today, as well as the other readings, is that God is calling us to a life of service. That we just can't be on our own path, our own individual way of going about things, no matter how right we think we are. To be a disciple of Christ really means to stick to God's plan. That we always have to merge what we're thinking into what God wants, what his overall plan is. And so, you know, we go about our lives on our individual day-to-day basis and do things that we need to do and we're responsible for. But what is God calling us to do? And if God, you know, a football analogy, because we were watching preseason football last night, is if God is the coach, you know, what's God's game plan for us? And then as players, we have to buy into that game plan and then perform as individual parts of that team. And if we do, we accomplish, as a team, we accomplish God's goals. So that's kind of where I'm coming from today. And then the question that came to me, and you'll hear it 3 more times today, is how does one go from being just an individual to being a good person, okay, to becoming a disciple and to becoming a team player for God? In our first reading today, and there's going to be a little question and answer here, so get ready. In our first reading today is about Moses. And the readings focus on Moses like the first time Moses shows up in the whole Bible. Moses is out, he took his flock. First of all, he's a shepherd. He's an individual shepherd just taking his flock out. And he's out on Mount Horeb, which becomes very important later on in the Bible. But Moses is a nobody at this point, right? What do we know about Moses? Just shout it out. What are just the basic stories about Moses? Say? His mom put him in a basket, so he was saved, right? Good. What else?
He was saved by one of the Pharaoh's family.
Someone speak up.
He was taken by one of Pharaoh's family out of the water.
Right. He had the queen or somebody took him out, and then how did he survive? took care of him?
Arizona.
His own mom, actually. They
Was
handed it
his
to the
witness.
servant.
Yeah.
Turned out it was his mom. So God's already like in his life, right? Big time. Saved him. Now, how about a little bit later? What do we know about Moses? Joseph, who said that? Murder. Moses killed somebody. Remember? Moses was a murderer. He killed an Egyptian. How many people in here are murderers? Okay. You don't have to do that. But I mean, think about that. So now Moses is doing what? In this story, he's a shepherd for his father-in-law. We had that whole discussion about shepherds. He's like out on his own. He's with his flock. He's taking care of. But you know, basically, it sounded to me like he couldn't find a job, and he took the lowly life of a shepherd. And so now he's wandering around. He's taking care of the flock. He's being responsible. And what happens? What's the big story today? What's the big thing that happens in the story?
Called by God.
He's called by God. A burning bush, right? Has anybody else seen a burning bush? Hands? No hands. In all of history, has anybody else talked to a burning bush? No. So, that we know, right? So, this is a special event on this special mountain, on this holy ground that we just spoke about, or just sang about. And Moses is attracted by, of all things, a burning bush. And what I see is that Moses is being called by God in a very special way, in a very unusual way. Burning bush that doesn't burn. Let's be honest. And he speaks back to it, and he hears God talking to him. And what are the words he says as soon as he hears God? Here I am. Here I am, Lord. And that becomes a theme later on in life throughout the Bible and stuff. And we just sang that song today too. So that's the original version of Here I Am. So God is calling Moses a murderer, a lowly shepherd, living his individual little life, out of just that life into something. What's he going to become? What's Moses going to become? Why is he known? He's going to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt from the Pharaoh. The rest of this story that we don't hear today is, he goes, how am I going to do this? I'm just a little shepherd. I can't even speak. And God, of course, we have this back and forth, and God slowly takes them from that life of individual, kind of a rookie, if you're in football terms again, unknown, takes them out of that life. And Moses agrees to become part of the big plan of God, not knowing where he's going. He gives up his old life of being the lowly shepherd, and he starts following what God has him do. And so this entire part of the Bible, there's a huge part of the Bible. Moses is like the prophet in the Bible. He's like one of the major guy. He does all these things and leads the people out and goes to Pharaoh. Imagine this little lowly servant that was rescued out of the river by the king's wife or whatever it was, and then that whole story is God was kind of looking after him the whole time. And really what that story is it's our story. If you look back and think about your life and imagine that you're sitting here right now, it's really all of our stories. God really has been involved in our lives to get us right here. So to that question, how does one go from an individual to being a disciple and being called by God to become a team player? So we've all been called. And in our baptism, we're even called. And that's just part of the bond that God has with us. But we go about life a lot of times not thinking that we're part of that team, that God's team. And we go about our lives sometimes not being just disciplined in following God's plan. And that's why we come to church. Or that's why there's spirituality, so that we're reminded of divine things and not just human things. And you go, okay, well that's great. You know, Moses, that story is great, Father Mike. Good story, wonderful, like it. Yeah, whatever. What about today? Are we called today? Are people called today to follow Christ and be part of God's game plan? So I want to give you a today example. And today example is very interesting to me, and I know that God lives, because I received a letter from a special person just the other day. It said, "Hello, from Salvation Army. Thank you for your hand-delivered letter to me several weeks ago. I have experienced so many miracles during my last 65 days here at Salvation Army. At this point, I have completed my structured transition and have regained my previous confidence and a hope-driven life to a small extent. There is so much goodness ahead of me now with God's plan. I know that the trials He placed before me were simply tests of my true convictions learned long ago. The Gospels and human principles which we strive to understand on a daily basis cements my Christian values that I've always been taught. But now the real work begins as I move from concept and belief to the reality of a rewarding job and a daily principle-driven life. However, the hardest step was guided through faith, and there is no way I'm going backward on my old life. Thank you for your unspoken support." Karen is also doing well. We know Karen. Well, I see her every Sunday, and now we can both resume going to St. George's soon. I have to sign off. Somebody needs a computer. Please say hi for me. See you soon. God bless you. So, God takes, and what I wrote, not knowing John would be with us, was I felt John was called by the Lord, because we stood here many times and talked. He was called by the Lord to go to Salvation Army. So he had to work out some problems. And then I put a little thing, don't we all have problems? You know, he wrote to me once, and then I wrote him back, and somehow the letter came back. So then I took the letter and drove it down there because something wasn't connecting. And he told me he was on this strict discipline program. He couldn't get out, and he had to stay there, and he had to do these things. And he was doing them, and he was doing well. And then I received this letter Friday. And, you know, he told me, you know, I now have like this purpose and this drive to go forward. And he's thanking God for helping him. And this is what I'm talking about. And I think this is what Christ is talking about. That you have to kind of give up your old individual life, and you got to take some time and discipline yourself and take care of that issue or those problems that keep you from going to the next step with God. And if God really is the coach and you're really the player that's buying into the plan for the team to go and do well, you have to do these things. And then if we need a list, you know, of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, we can simply look at our second reading today. We just reread Romans 12, 9 through 21. Just the first part. It says, "Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal, but be ardent in the Spirit, and serve the Lord." And the serve the Lord part is the part that we always have to remember, right? So how does one go from being an individual to becoming a disciple and a team player for the Lord today? Jesus tells his disciples 2,000 years ago, and he's telling us today the same thing. If you want to be my follower, deny yourself. Take up the cross and follow me. If you were out to save your own life, you're going to lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you will find true life. Amen.
Amen.